The South African Institute of Race Relations has released an electoral landscape report in the lead-up to the South African presidential elections. We speak to Marius Roodt, head of campaigns at the Institute for Race Relations, to find out more.
Well, a report, it's a poll of people's political attitudes and the parties they support, and it's been something we've been running since September last year at regular intervals, and the most recent data we have is from this past Saturday. And what it shows is that ANC support has dropped down to about 55%. The DA is more or less where it was in the last election, a little bit up from 22 to 23, 24. And the EFF is, looks like they're doing pretty well. They've about doubled their support from 6 to around about 13 or 14%. We've also looked at what's happening in 3 specific provinces. That's Gauteng, the Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. And in Gauteng, it looks like the ANC could get under 50% in the elections, according to our polling. And so that means there'll probably be a coalition government in Gauteng after tomorrow. We've got the ANC at about 44%, DA 32, 33. EFF is actually quite flat since the last election, about 11 or 12. And then in the Western Cape, we've got the DA is holding fairly steady at about 55%. ANC has dropped quite a lot. It might only get about 20% of the vote compared to 30 in the last election. And the EFF is doing quite well in the Western Cape, going from about 2% to probably about 10% or so. And then KwaZulu-Natal, which is also very interesting, the ANC has dropped from 64% to possibly under 50%, according to our polling, which is also a big drop for them. And the 2 big opposition parties, the DA and the EFF, are both looking pretty good. DA is at about 20% compared to 12% in the last election, and the EFF has seen a very big jump from about 2% also to about 10 or 12%. So there'll be, the ANC is definitely going to win, but its majority is probably going to be reduced, and there are going to be some interesting results in some of the provinces, most probably.
Now, what was the criteria for this particular report?
Well, what we did was we polled around about 2,000 people, obviously different people for each of the polls, just to see what they thought. We did it telephonically, and the reason for doing this is just to see what people are thinking, what the electoral landscape looks like, and allows people to kind of predict what's going to happen in the future. Not that this is a prediction, just gives you an overview of the political landscape, but also helps people with what they're planning for the future. It helps businesses, and it's also just interesting to see what's happening politically in the country.
Could this report actually impact those who are yet to vote, or is this just merely statistical information?
It's a bit of both. It's statistics that shows people what's happening in the country, what's changing in political, with political attitudes and so on. But I do think it might change some people who perhaps were thinking of not voting, perhaps an ANC supporter who's seeing that the ANC's dropped. They might decide, instead of staying away, they might decide to go support the ANC, or somebody in Gauteng who's not too happy with the ANC, but they see that the DA has got a good chance of bringing the ANC under 50%. Instead of maybe staying at home or voting for another party, they might decide to go vote DA tomorrow. But I mean, this is all, we haven't done this to try to influence people. It's just to give people information about what's happening in the country and to see what the electoral landscape looks like.
Now, in terms of the youth, what's the voter turnout roughly expected to be?
Well, with young people, voter turnout is always a lot lower than for people who are a bit older, and it's common phenomenon we saw in the UK with Brexit. The proportion of people who came out to vote in the Brexit referendum was much higher the older they were compared to young people. I think we're probably going to see voter turnout of a little bit lower than what we've seen in previous elections, probably around about 70%. And then I would think our polling is, or well, hopefully our polling will be right, but as I say, I think we're probably going to see the ANC drop below 60% to around about 55, 56. The DA is going to stay fairly flat. If a good election for the DA will be 25%, and I think we'll see good growth for the EFF. They're going to be 11 or 12%, and then the rest of the votes will be divided by smaller parties, Freedom Front, ACDP, COPE, and so on. And then, but I think the province to watch is Gauteng, because I think that is where we'll see the ANC under 50%, and then we're going to see a coalition government. Who knows who will make up that coalition government, but there definitely will be a coalition in Gauteng after tomorrow.
I'm John Road, and you're watching Joburg Today.